In December 1941, as Nazi armies stood at the gates of Moscow, a single telegram reached Stalin's desk. It carried news that would change the course of World War II. For the first time, Hitler's army was retreating. The telegram arrived at the Kremlin in the early hours of December 6, 1941, carried by hands that understood the weight of what they held. The message came from General Georgy Zhukov, commanding the Soviet forces defending Moscow, and its contents represented the culmination of calculations so dangerous, so balanced on the edge of catastrophe, that even now, with the words decoded and laid before him, Joseph Stalin could scarcely allow himself to believe what they said. The Red Army was counterattacking. The Wehrmacht was retreating. The German advance on Moscow had been stopped and in places thrown back. For the first time since the invasion began in June, the tide had turned. Stalin read the message in the office where he had spent the previous 5 months managing the most desperate crisis the Soviet Union had ever faced. In that moment, the gamble he had made revealed itself to have succeeded. The Germans were not invincible. The Red Army had not been destroyed. The Soviet state had bent, but it had not broken. What Stalin felt was not relief nor simple triumph. It was something colder and more complex. Vindication. The proof that decisions so ruthless and devoid of sentiment had been justified. To understand what Stalin had gambled, one must return to the summer of 1941. Operation Barbarossa, launched on June 22nd, had shattered Soviet defenses with unprecedented speed. Entire armies vanished. The encirclements at Minsk, Smolensk, and Uman swallowed hundreds of thousands of men. By late summer, German forces had driven deep into Soviet territory. Army Group North advanced on Leningrad. Army Group South carved through Ukraine. Army Group Center stood within reach of Moscow. Observers believed the Soviet Union was finished. Stalin responded with decisions unthinkable under normal circumstances. The first was to remain in Moscow. When evacuation was urged, he refused. He understood that his presence was essential to the psychological survival of the state. If he fled, panic would become uncontrollable. He stayed and staked his life on Moscow's defense. The second gamble was even greater. Throughout autumn 1941, Stalin redeployed forces from the Far East. Intelligence from Richard Sorge in Tokyo indicated Japan would not attack. Stalin trusted it. He stripped Siberia's of its best divisions and sent them west. If the intelligence was wrong, the Soviet Union would face destruction. He made the bet. The divisions moved. By late November, they were hidden outside Moscow, ready. The third gamble involved reversing the effects of his own purges. Thousands of competent officers had been imprisoned or executed. Now, Stalin released some and granted commanders greater freedom. Zhukov embodied this shift. Blunt and uncompromising, he survived because Stalin needed competence more than obedience. Through November, the situation worsened. German artillery could be heard in Moscow. Some units approached within 15 miles of the Kremlin. Zhukov told Stalin he could not guarantee victory. Stalin asked what he needed: time, reinforcements, freedom. Stalin gave him all three. On November 7th, Stalin staged the Red Square parade. Troops marched past the Kremlin and went directly to the front. It was political theater of extreme risk, but it worked. Morale stabilized. Panic receded. By December, the German offensive had exhausted itself. Supply lines had collapsed. Winter crippled equipment. Frostbite ravaged units. Hitler ordered continued attacks regardless. Zhukov recognized the moment of exhaustion. On December 5th, he told Stalin it was time. Not for a limited attack, but for a major offensive. If it failed, Moscow would be defenseless. Stalin authorized it. The Red Army attacked on December 6th along hundreds of miles of front. The results exceeded expectations. German units were thrown onto the defensive. Retreat threatened to become rout. By December, reports showed German forces being pushed back from Kalinin and Tula. Soviet troops retook towns. The Wehrmacht was being beaten. Stalin did not celebrate. He calculated. Could this success be expanded? He pushed for a general offensive in early 1942. Some gains were made, but limitations appeared. The front stabilized. Still, survival itself was victory. The Wehrmacht was no longer invincible. Psychologically and strategically, everything had changed. Stalin understood the war was far from over. New crises would come, but the fundamental question had been answered. The Soviet Union could survive. Later records would reveal how close Germany had come to collapse. Hitler's refusal to retreat barely prevented disaster. Stalin had not needed total German collapse. He needed failure of the invasion, and he achieved it. He had stayed in Moscow. He had stripped the Far East. He had trusted his generals. He had authorized an offensive. Each decision could have failed. Together, they succeeded. Stalin was not a hero. He remained capable of cruelty and paranoia. The purges and early disasters were his responsibility, but he was the man who made the gambles that saved the Soviet state. By spring 1942, industry was recovering. The Red Army was learning. Foundations for victory were being laid. Stalin carried knowledge few have known. He had faced national annihilation and turned it aside. The human cost was immense. He did not process it as conscience, but the strategic achievement was undeniable. He had gambled everything, and won. In later years, other gambles would follow. None matched the stakes of 1941. The telegram from Zhukov marked the turning point. The Red Army was counterattacking. The Germans were retreating. Moscow had held. The gamble had succeeded.